Sound System Outernational is an ongoing initiative of practitioners and researchers, and it runs in association with Goldsmiths, which is part of the University of London. And it's dedicated to recognising and stimulating and supporting sound system cultures worldwide. As we know, sound system cultures are worldwide already, but it's nice that it is associated with an institution and is becoming a kind of a frame of practice and exploration in and of itself. But anyway, since 2016, Sound System Outernational has created spaces for dance and discussion by organising events, curating publications, and bringing together practitioners and researchers of sound system culture worldwide. It fosters intergenerational conversation and dialogue, and its purpose is to help to strengthen and explore technologies, politics, and aesthetics of the sound system and sound system culture. So, Sound System Outernational is in its sort of number 7, which is great. So obviously it's been going strong, and it is a partner to Sound System Technologies, which is founded in 2021, and it's funded by the ERC. It's an ERC funded project. It examines culture, diaspora, and knowledge of subaltern practices, and in the global south in particular, and their use of sound technologies. So, alongside the publications and the publications and the conferences, things like this, they also premiere short movies and films, and the films are available on the YouTube channel. So on this YouTube channel, for those of you who are watching online, this YouTube channel is the channel where they premiere films as well. So the program for films and for this event are also available from Linktree, and today's panel, which I will now talk about, as we've now got some more people coming in, hello and welcome, is street music culture and the struggle for survival. So each guest, as I've mentioned before, to those of you who were here a bit earlier, will speak for around 15 minutes. And we've got to try and keep to time because there's lots of good stuff coming. If you do have questions, like I've said before, put them in the Q&A with the name of the particular person you want to ask the question to, if there is a specific person, and that will be fed through to me and we can ask those questions at the end. Again, this session is live streamed on the YouTube channel. For those of you who are actually on YouTube, you know that it's being live streamed right now. So now I will briefly introduce the panelists, although they have done many amazing things. So first and foremost, we will start with the amazing Sonjah Stanley Niaah, and she's a senior lecturer in cultural studies at UE, or the University of the West Indies, the Mona campus in Jamaica. She is a leading author, teacher, and researcher on Black Atlantic cultural geographies and performance geographies, popular culture, and the sacred, as well as cultural studies more broadly. She has published a handful of books as well. So some of the books are Reggae Pilgrims, Festivals and the Movement of Jah People, Dancehall from Slave Ship to Ghetto, and she's the editor of Dancehall, a reader on Jamaican music and culture. Then we have Bruno Barbosa Monique, who completed his PhD in sociology at the London School of Economics in 2016, holds a degree in economics from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, as well as a master's degree from the University of Rio de Janeiro as well. And the masters included aspects of sociology and anthropology. His interests also include the relationship between the implementation of security programs and cultural production, critical race theory, which is an interesting topic at the moment, and political sociology as well. Then we have Moses Itten, who is also a PhD candidate, or shall I say is a PhD candidate at the School of Media and Communication at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology in Australia, and is a researcher on digital cumbia music through fieldwork in Berlin, Buenos Aires, Bogota, several Mexican cities, as well as online. He has more than 15 years practice as a DJ, a music producer, with his Cumbia Cosmonauts project. He has toured every continent. He's also the co-founder of the Cumbia Massive DJ Collective and an award-winning producer of radio documentaries, and has assisted in the translation of the oral history book Oja Suaves, which is Soft Eyes Sound System Cumbia from Mexico to the World by Miriam Wirtz. He also holds a master's in community cultural development at the University of Melbourne, as well as a BA in communication and international studies with a focus on Mexico from the University of Technology, Sydney. Next, we have Pax Nindi, and who was crowned the world's first dub VJ, that's VJ, in the early 1990s by the Jamaican Gleaner newspaper due to his use of visuals at the Albany Theatre, where he ran his club Dub Vision, and also at the Rocket Jarshaka sessions. His band of the 80s, Harare Dread, was popular at festivals and venues due to Pax's original African reggae dub plates created from Harare Dread tunes. As an ex-Arts Council senior officer, Pax is currently CEO of Global Carnivals and recognized internationally as a renowned carnival consultant who has been responsible for running and initiating numerous carnivals. Some examples of this include Hackney Carnival in London, Hull Carnival in Hull, Carnivals of the World, which is in Reading, also in the UK, Accra Carnival in Ghana, Isiolo Peace Carnival in Kenya, Cowley Road Carnival in Oxford, St Paul's Carnival in Bristol. The list goes on and on and on, which is an amazing list. And in relation to Notting Hill Carnival, he's currently responsible for the Brazilian elements. And last but not least, we have Jean-Christophe Servin, who's a sociologist at the Centre Norbert Elias, and his research interests are in the dynamics of cultural forms, notably in connection with digital media transition and the relationship between art, culture, and territory. So those are our amazing guests who have amazing accolades. And so now I will move over to our first speaker, which is Professor Sonjah Stanley Niaah, and her paper is entitled Festivals at the Crossroads, Response and Resilience in the Reggae Transnation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monique. Let me just say that it's really a pleasure to be at Sound System Outernational 7. I've been perhaps, I think maybe at 5 of them. So it's a real pleasure to see not only the growth of these conferences, these events, but that we are moving into bigger and larger spaces. So my presentation, I hope you're seeing my screen, is entitled Festivals at the Crossroads, Response and Resilience in the Reggae Transnation. And I have far too many slides to be dealt with in 15 minutes. So I'm going to go through them pretty quickly, just to give you a background on how I got to this place and what it is that my academic work has been about. So I started paying attention to announcements of the new virus as early as December 2019. In fact, I remember posting on my Instagram page about this thing, and I knew very early that it was something to pay attention to. By the time we got to all of the announcements about the pandemic, the issues related to physical distancing, and prescriptions related to face-to-face events, we knew in Jamaica that, of course, sound system dances, reggae festivals, large events would certainly be affected, and effectively were all put on lockdown in many spaces. I, of course, foreground reggae festivals as outgrowths of the indigenous musical innovations in Jamaica. And most importantly, there would be no reggae festivals without reggae, without sound systems. I have a bit of a screen issue here because I can't see my full screen when this miniature thing is up. Anyway, so what are some of the questions I'm posing in the context of this paper? To what extent can festivals and sound systems at the heart of some festivals be seen as a collective strategy towards sustainable entertainment practices in a global landscape of the future? And as collective events have taken on more individualistic features with new auditory, physical, and monetary schemes, what hope lies in the mix for festivals and sound systems? And I use global reggae festivals as a case. I focus on them in the context of this paper. which centers the longitudinal work that I've done on international reggae festival economies and geographies over the last 10 years. And the paper this morning presents special focus on 2020. There would, as I said before, be no reggae festivals without sound systems, and the indigenous musics of Jamaica all owe some degree of genetic capital to Jamaica's national instrument, which is the sound system. In the same way that we can talk about the steel pan as Trinidad's national instrument, based on the kind of innovation that has gone into the creation of sound systems, I consider the sound system as Jamaica's national instrument. There are, in fact, inextricable links, therefore, common genealogies and worldwide webs, which are significant across the work I've been doing over the last 2 decades. And I in the context of this work, I'm reconceptualizing festivals at the crossroads. And so I begin in the spirit of Camille Brathwaite's Legba and Limbo poems to center attention on the larger cosmology around African understanding of the crossroads. The crossroads, a space of liminality, but it's also a space of communication, of getting in touch with spirit, very much what happens at many of the reggae festivals that I've studied over the last 10 years. So I center my attention on these festivals, a central component of the reggae music translation, which I foreground in the larger project on reggae festival economies and geographies. And how did I get here? I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, but my background is in geography. I was very much keen to explore progress in human and more specifically cultural geography, exploring works by Diana Taylor, Jane Desmond, and of course, by the time we get to structuralists and post-structuralists, Sosary, Barth, Stuart Hall, and asking questions. What about the sacred? What about space? What about the spatial imaginary and the visual? What about the Caribbean? It's global consumption. And so my work is characterized by performance geography, but more specifically, dancehall geographies. My first book, Dancehall from Slave Ship to Ghetto, and now in the context of this work, certainly festival geographies. There's another important part of my work, and if you were here yesterday, you would have heard Caroline Cooper mention the ways in which I have been foregrounding this whole debate about noise versus sound, and de-emphasizing what I constitute as a pejorative thinking about noise in the context of creative work around sound. So that's just a little bit about my work. And of course, it goes all the way back to the slave ship dance, limbo. Here we go again, liminality, limbo, the crossroads. It's all there in the center of how it is we have operated, lived, and had our being in the context of the Caribbean. So what do I mean by performance geography, which has informed the work I do in terms of dancehall geographies and festival geographies? I see it as a mapping of the locations used, types and systems of use, politics of their location in relation to other sites and other practices, the character of events or rituals in particular locations, and how different performances or performers relate to each other within and across different cultures. So performance geography, I'm happy to tell you that I'm the first person who put those two terms together. And to a large extent, my work has been characterized by this. So what would performance geography look like? A summary of dancehall's multiple spaces based on the work I did in terms of dancehall geographies would look like this. A spatial divide, spatial system, spatial descriptors, an entire schema of understanding what becomes legitimate or marginal, what is nomadic, what is limitless, boundaryless, and so on. But okay, I'm just going to switch very quickly now through the whole context of theorizing sound, reggae festivals, and resilience. I am centering celebration and citizenship. They all meet in a transnational union, that of being human at the crossroads in the context of a pandemic. And of course, when you think about Jamaica, Jamaican music, what gets represented even in the context of these reggae festivals, reggae being a catch-all phrase or name for all of Jamaica's indigenous music in some context, you're seeing a large spread of 7 to 8 distinct genres of music in the latter half of the 20th century, some 60-year period there, where musical genres, rocksteady, reggae, ska, dub, Niaah, bingy, and so on, all take shape. So the sound system as the voice of the people, very much, I don't have to tell people here about early sound systems being at the heart, Headley Jones as one of the key characters in the amplification of sound and the technology that has moved us into the context of understanding genres like dub and so on. The sound system I constitute as a politics from below. All of this making its way into the kind of scholarship to be done on things like reggae festivals. But if you look at a mapping, and this is a really preliminary mapping of major sound systems by country, limited in some ways by language, because of course there are sound systems all over Northern Africa, but many of them not heated in terms of the numbers appearing as we would see in countries like South Africa, for example. And so there's a global impact, major sound systems by country. We can look at the UK, for example, turning up with 394, 222 in Jamaica. There's a sound system association here as well. 68 in Japan, 48 at the time of the mapping that was done here. Another view, major sound systems by country. But of course, reggae festivals before the pandemic, let me give you a bit of insight very quickly into some of the work that I've been doing. There have been gaps in the scholarship, many unanswered questions, and of course, less than desirable capacity to even collect valuable data on reggae festivals in a global context. So the project, Reggae Festival Geographies and Economies, has been aimed at filling one key area of this research gap. And I've been working on this project. It has turned out to be a really longitudinal study. And it's interesting because the data has been a little skittish. And so COVID-19 becomes the last sort of moment on the long trajectory to examine what reggae festivals have presented for us as lessons in a global context. So the project was about defining the reggae festival. What is a festival? What is the reggae festival? Does it mean different things depending on the location, and who is a reggae pilgrim? And the whole context of understanding, for example, that Jamaican music, even though we center Jamaica in there, the first reggae festival was not in Jamaica. It was the Woodbury Ski Area Reggae Fest. And there are many things to be said about how Reggae Sunsplash as an event emerges in Jamaica in 1978, billed as the biggest reggae and disco festival in the history of the world, ran for 8 nights. And of course, you will hear later on in the presentation that it was up for rebirth in 2020. I'm going to skip through this much. You can see some of the mapping that I've done in terms of reggae festival geographies, and going, mapping again prominent sites from 2015 to 2017, in data in terms of the market share, USA, Germany, Jamaica, Canada up there. And of course, just major updates on sites, which countries in terms of the period 2000 to 2013, top destinations for reggae festivals and so on. Another view. These are interesting facts that I've been able to gather just in terms of the economy, a global festival economy there of 505 billion. Now, let me take you just very quickly now to the meat of the matter in terms of this presentation. Reggae festivals after the pandemic. So if you look at the WHO advice regarding protocols, effective implementation on a global scale, we know that prescriptions of this kind, the social and physical distancing, would have been quite deleterious to entertainment, live entertainment, and more broadly tourism activities, which are in-person, face-to-face, and often involving large gatherings. Jamaica has approximately 30 reggae music festivals which take place locally each year, including the vastly popular Reggae Sumfest, Rebel Salute, Unruly Fest, and the newly reborn Reggae Sunsplash, which was going to be making its comeback in 2020 in a face-to-face context, but had to innovate to be online. This number does not take into account other Jamaican cultural festivals across different art genres, such as film and literature festivals. Now, in terms of estimates of earnings, 2 of the largest festivals in Jamaica, Reggae Sumfest and Carnival, they both announced in 2019 that they earned approximately 1 billion Jamaican dollars. Both of them canceled face-to-face events in 2020. And by way of estimated loss, therefore, Jamaica's festival industry lost well over 2 billion Jamaican dollars. Now, this may seem small when compared to other spaces. The UK, for example, with a festival and concert market worth 2.6 billion, a rise from 2.46 billion in 2018. This was published in 2019. Festivals in 2020, from a minimum of 402 reggae festivals documented during the period 2020 to 2019, many occurring annually, the novel coronavirus pandemic caused live reggae festival offerings to plummet after March 2020. From this period to December 2020, 7 events, or 5.7% of event samples, still took place in a face-to-face context. These 7 events from March 13, Moon Splash, Outside Fest, Northwest World Reggae Festival, We Dub Festival, Africa Festival, Reggae Jerk and Wine Festival, Sister Fest Arts Festival in Canada. So global festivals in this context, again, a sample of these festivals at the end of 2020 revealed the extent of the impact. There were approximately 122 reggae festivals initially planned, both multi-day and one-day festivals across all continents and regions, with the USA and the UK remaining amongst the most popular regions outside of Jamaica. Of these 122 festivals planned, 55.7% of them were cancelled, while the rest either took place before the initial lockdown measures or pivoted to an online platform. Some of them still found their way, as we spoke about, 7% of them, 7 of them happening in a face-to-face context. So you can see the numbers there in terms of number of reggae festivals planned and those cancelled, etc. The online festivals came up with a very interesting analysis of 54 reggae festivals that did not take place. 24 of them took place online. And you can see in the table where it is those festivals took place and how many. It highlights the fact that Jamaica hosted a quarter of all online reggae festivals in 2020. The USA right behind, hosting 20.8%. The European region with 20.08%. The UK hosted 3, or 12.5%, of online festivals. Only 2 had clear documentation of fees, and those fees averaged US $13. August, of course, typically saw most reggae festivals after March 2020. Now, I'm indebted to Caroline Cooper, for example, for bringing this to my attention. And I use Rotterdam Sunsplash as a case in my larger research. But in this context, for understanding resilience and response in a global context, based on COVID-19, Rotterdam Camp 2021 is certainly a case. And this grew out of a dream that the organizers had for a long time, they had this dream to create a permanent campsite to have live events and to live the Rotterdam philosophy and spirit. It's characterized by yoga, massage, meditation, dance, all on the beach, a variety of sporting activities congealing a holistic vision where reggae music and nature come together in a sustainable living model. And what's fascinating for me is the fact that it's aiming to be 100% self-sufficient. So small music events, DJ sessions, secret shows make up key offerings. And this is, of course, an innovation, but something you can see, which I'm going to say something about at the end, that this kind of responsiveness, this kind of resilience, this kind of innovation, these ideas have always sort of been in our minds. There's been an aim, a certain kind of ambition, and these are actually, in the context of this pandemic, coming forth in new and innovative ways. And I know I'm probably just about out of time. It's the first time in Europe that a festival will offer a space to host permanent glamping, as they call it, a kind of glamour camping, in the context of what we know to be the mega European festival, European Reggae Festival, which is Rotterdam Sunsplash. So the new reggae pilgrim, I would argue, is human, understands what it means to be human, and certainly affected by the vagaries of COVID-19. An ethical human, a non-discriminatory human, loyal, world citizen, cosmopolitan, of course, activist, socially engaged, multi-ethnic, mobile, sustainable lifestyle, a glamper now, vaccinated, of course, adaptable, and certainly has access to online platforms in the context of being able to consume reggae festivals. So there are new musical landscapes in this pandemic. The spotlight has been casted on sound systems, dance events, and festivals within the global soundscape, where new modes of performance and consumption take shape daily. In so many ways, I am arguing, resilience and response have been part of the DNA of the emergence and proliferation of Jamaican sound practice, sound system, and reggae festivals as offspring, which have all experienced various schemes of lockdown. And if you know my work, Dancehall from Slave Ship to Ghetto documents quite a bit of this kind of suppression, lockdown, raids in various shapes and forms, which have affected Jamaican music. So thank you so much for listening. Big thanks to my research assistants, Georgette McGlashan Miller and Ashley Cork for the research assistants. I've already bigged up Caroline Cooper, but I want to big her up again because of her, so many of us are interested in doing this kind of research that we do. Thank you so much.
Wow, wow, thank you so much. I'm hoping that you can hear me. It came to my attention that my mic was the static was a bit distracting. So hopefully it's not distracting now. Okay, right. So okay, very, very good. All right. So that was amazing. You know, especially at this time when I think about some of my students that are looking at what's happening with the gig economy because of COVID, this looking to Jamaican sound systems and, you know, the way that it has kind of informed all of well, I suppose inform the climate generally in terms of music and music consumption. You know, looking at the source again, how they've managed to navigate space is something that we can learn from and glean from in the pandemic context as well. So just to remind everybody, if you do have any questions at all, don't forget to put them into the Q&A with the name of the person you are directing the question to. It can be a general question, but if it is a specific question, please make sure you put the name so I can direct it to the right person at the end. But we should move on just to make sure that we can keep the time. Yes, I'm keeping my eyes well on the clock. So now we will move on to Bruno Barbosa Muniz and his paper, Genocide and Culture in the Media, Structural Racism and Funk Dancing in Rio de Janeiro. Take it away.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the organizers of this incredible event in which I have the opportunity to participate for the second time. I also want to remember that many of those reflections today were developed in partnership with other members of the project Politics, hosted by the Center of Social Studies of the University of Coimbra, especially Silvia Maeso, Niaah Araújo, and Luana Coelho, with whom I've been producing some papers reflecting on the ideas presented here today. So I want to greet the other panelists and say that it is a pleasure to be able to meet you all in this session, even though the pandemic does not allow us all to be in the same physical space. And this is also the theme of my communication here today, how the pandemic has affected street music culture. In this sense, the title of the panel couldn't be more adequate: Street Music Cultures, the Struggle for Survival. So when one talks about survival in music, one could think in two different senses: the survival of specific styles and the survival of those artists and professionals that produce music and art in general. But when we consider the pandemic, this difference seems very unimportant, once the survival of street culture and the survival of those who produce it are both at risk, and it is impossible to disconnect one thing from the other. So I think most Brazilians know the song Não Deixe o Samba Morrer, Don't Let Samba Die, which was composed by Edson Conceição e Aloysio Silva, recorded in 1975 by Alcione. Her words, Don't Let the Samba Die, are not referring to the style alone, since the second part of the refrain says that the morro was made of samba. Morro is a word commonly used to refer to the favela communities located in the hills of Rio de Janeiro. Morro is another word for hill. And those areas are marked by lack of infrastructure, lack of basic social services, majority Black population, and constant police brutality against the people living in those areas. When Alcione recorded this song, samba was one of the main representatives of Brazilian street culture, and this continues to be true today. Nonetheless, other styles appear to share the streets with samba, and one of them is baile funk. Baile funk shares similarities and differences with sound system music. One similarity is the importance of the equivalent to the sound system in Brazil, which is called equipe de som. In baile funk, the treble is very important. The percussion sound, sometimes made with the voice, creates a very frenetic and syncopated beat. And even though the bass is also important, but its appearance is not continuous, and it appears sometimes more as another form of percussion. I think I'll try to show you some really quickly, one beat. I hope you can hear it.
Geral viu lá no Twitter, tu prestou bem atenção. G3 cantando firme, da tropa do Salomão. Ele que é puxando ponte, tropa do mano apertou. 25 tacou sem do AR do professor.
Okay, sorry, it had to be quick so I don't lose my time. So continuing. So let us return now to the theme of survival by discussing the notion of genocide, a word that has been largely used lately by journalists, academics, lawyers, activists, and politicians in Brazil during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, this concept is also very important to Black movements in Brazil and has been in use since at least the end of the 1970s, when Abdias do Nascimento published his book, O Genocídio do Negro Brasileiro, O Processo de Racismo Mascarado, which we can translate as the genocide of the Brazilian Black people, a process of a masked racism. In this book, he introduced an important critique to the notion that Brazil was a racial democracy and argues that Black people in Brazil were living under very racist structures, masked behind a facade of cordiality and diversity. This part of Nascimento's argument was already largely discussed in academia and the press, but it is very relevant to point to the fact that he was one of the first in Brazil to argue that there is an ongoing genocide against Black people in this country. So let us go back to the present and the pandemic. Since last year, a number of opinion articles written by journalists from the biggest media conglomerates in Brazil started to use the word genocide, not in a denialist way as it used to be when commenting the denunciation of genocide articulated by Black movements, but this time to affirm its existence without, however, referring to racism or anti-Blackness or even the killing of indigenous people in Brazil. The word genocide appeared in the title along with different articulists such as Bob Megali, Lish Vieira, Miriam Leitão, Bernardo Melo Franco. All those pieces, those texts, have one element in common. They discuss the genocide against the Brazilian people without mentioning indigenous or Black people. Liz Vieira, for example, stated on March 7, 2021, in a text called Unreason, Chaos, and Genocide, that the Bolsonaro government generates chaos and commits genocide. He even uses the term necropolitics coined by Mbembe, but he doesn't develop the term to discuss racism, racialization. So he's basically talking about genocide against Brazilian people. So we adopt the position that the administration of COVID-19 carried out so far by the executive branch is indeed genocidal, since it does not consider the racial issue as crucial for the response to the pandemic. By March 2021, Brazil had twice as many white people vaccinated as Black people in a country with a Black majority. Legal formalism and its imposition on other areas of society, such as politics, aims to establish an advance of law represented in Latin America lands by colonial institutions over other areas of social life. So today, in this case, I want to discuss how law and its operationalization by police institutions and the legal system advances over street culture, in this case, baile funk music, by bringing the issue of the pandemic. Last year, in the Outernational event, I talked about the arrest of Renanda Penha, who was accused of collaborating with drug trafficking for sending a WhatsApp message in a group warning about the incursion of armored cars in the favela where he lives. And then he was accused of being an olheiro, a low-rank position in drug trafficking, responsible for watching the streets for the arrival of the police. So it was a clear attempt to criminalize the work of Renan da Penha, which was growing in evidence and popularity. And this time I'll be talking about how events in favela communities are being interrupted by police during the pandemic. And the issue here is not whether those events should be taking place or not. Personally, I do think that social distancing, the use of masks and vaccination are the responses that we need to end this pandemic. But the question one should ask is, what is the response of the police or other social order agents when faced with agglomerations in areas of the city deemed dangerous when compared to agglomerations happening in wealthy areas? Let's start with two different narratives about the results of operations aiming to stop events organized by wealthy individuals in rich areas of Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo. In this case, for instance, the police enter a house in Jardins, a rich neighborhood in São Paulo, and the event was happening inside a law firm and sold tickets for the price of 1,600 reais. And one of the attendees shouted insults to the police when the police raided the event to stop the event. And she was demanding the police to go to the favela, as in, here we are all law-abiding citizens or different than the other people in the favelas, and we are allowed to do this, so you should go to the favelas so I will show really quick this video. Okay, so sorry for the lack of translation, but I believe the content was quite explicit. So a second example is a party that occurred in Copacabana Palace, one of the most traditional five-star hotels in Rio de Janeiro. 500 people attended the event, which had a funk singer, Ludmilla, as one of the artists singing during the party. And the social order agents, they just went to the event, saw nothing wrong, and they only decided to find the hotel after videos emerged on the internet showing that the people were inside with a lot of people together without masks. So, and then the party also had a number of law offenders associated with illegal gambling and politicians associated with corruption. Nonetheless, no one saw this fact being mentioned by mainstream media or the police arriving with big guns to stop the event. So how does the media and the police act when agglomerations happen in favela? First, one needs to understand that those territories are constantly constructed by the press, politicians, and the justice system, and dangerous and uncontrollable areas of the city that demand the heavy hand of the state. So one first observation is that a number of footages from before the pandemic were circulating on the internet as fake news, already checked by checking agencies associated with supposed baile funk parties. This remark does not exclude the fact that actual baile funks happened during the pandemic. However, the media and law and order agents had a very different approach to those events. So, for instance, in one of those occasions, 20 people were arrested, accused of organizing an event in a favela. So, and the narrative of the press was also completely criminalizing the footages. Everything was the same story, associated the events happening in favelas with other criminal events occurring in the vicinity of the event that had nothing to do with the baile funk. So the narrative is extremely criminalizing and describes the situation as a cluster of illegality and criminality, what was not done regarding the event in Copacabana Palace or any other situation in other areas of the city which are not favelas. And also we would question ourselves how the police would react in case a Black person attending an event in a favela did the same thing as the woman we saw in the video, who screamed insults at the police during this party in this area, in this place. So, of course, the pandemic is not necessary for the violent repression of baile funks to occur, since still in 2019, 9 people died during a police operation carried out in Paraisópolis, one of the biggest favelas from São Paulo, and a number of denunciations were conducted by APA Funk, an association of professionals and friends of funk music in Rio, describing cases that included physical aggressions to sound systems, destruction of the equipment, extortion, and so on. So the cases are not isolated cases, but a modus operandi of the police that identify those parties as events associated with drug trafficking. So the repression of baile funk this style of music, which is inspired by other Black styles and produced by Black people in Brazil, has been conducted by police and military institutions since the dictatorship period in Brazil. So we consider this repression of baile funk as part of this ongoing structural genocide discussed by Abdias do Nascimento. However, the genocide as described in the press in this context of pandemic emergency would never include the repression of baile funk and it does not discuss the constant police brutality carried out in favelas. In fact, the pandemic gave the perfect context to legitimize the violence against baile funk while silencing the voices denouncing it. In the same media organizations accusing the government of being genocidal. The genocide, when denounced by Black and indigenous movements, was always deemed an exaggeration and silence. Now the disease made this structural problem more acute, and the word started to be adopted by the mass media. But does this use of the word help to raise awareness to the historical and structural violence impinged against racialized groups in Brazil? Or does it serve specific political purposes that have the effect of erasing former discussions on the theme while placing all the responsibility on the current government? I want to finalize by saying that the Bolsonaro, the current government of Brazil, is in fact co-responsible for the ongoing genocide in Brazil, but he's only the most perverse phase of a process that has colonial roots, a process that is still supported and sustained by sectors of Brazilian population which are represented in the current government, but also by other individuals, political parties, groups, and companies that now reveal all their disgust towards Bolsonaro, but that participates and collaborates to the situation we describe here today. So thank you very much for the opportunity and looking forward for the conversation and the debates.
Thank you so much, Bruno. Amazing, amazing, amazing contribution there. So if anybody has any questions for Bruno, don't forget to put them in the Q&A. Make sure you have his name there so I can direct the questions to him. If you have general questions as well, that's fine. I know that I have to keep my eye on the clock, but to my mind at least, I'm seeing something definitely about race and class and when things become acceptable or not. So whilst it's innovative practices that are taking place here, in some contexts they may become acceptable in the context of COVID, like glamping or being from, not from the favelas, from being from the nice parts of Brazil. So there's lots of dynamics here when it comes to the struggle for survival around race and class and respectability as well. All right, let me stop talking because that's one of my strong points, and let's keep on moving. So our next contributor is Moses Itten, and his paper is From Dancing on the Streets to Social Media, Mexican Sonidero Sound System Culture in the Times of COVID-19. Over to you. Oh, is Moses not here? Oh, okay, we can't hear you. Oh, that's it, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, cool. So thanks, Monique. You did introduce me earlier, but I'll just briefly introduce myself again. because it sort of feeds into what I then want to talk about. So I'm a PhD candidate at RMIT University here in Melbourne, Australia, researching how digital cumbia functions as a process of realization. I've also been a DJ close to 2 decades, and most of which time I've specialized in cumbia and produced music as cumbia cosmonauts. The fieldwork for my PhD research has been on and offline, and I was very fortunate to spend most of 2019 traveling to the Mexican cities of Monterrey, Puebla, and Mexico City. Also went to Bogota, Colombia, Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Berlin in Germany to interview 27 DJs and producers of digital cumbia, and of course to participate in observation at lots of events, studio sessions, and in people's homes. Some of the interviews in Mexico were also with sonideros, the sound system operators who have been studied as a socio-cultural phenomenon mostly, but their crucial influence on music production, especially cumbia, has received very little attention from scholars. I first began producing cumbia in 2007, in a time where social media was a new phenomenon and the internet first became Internet 2.0. But the productions which initially inspired me were cumbia sonidera, that is sound system cumbia, and it was mostly digitally produced. In my first academic article about to be published in a special Sound System Outernational issue of the Journal of World Popular Music, I aim to show how digital cumbia was very much created as part of sonidero culture in the 1990s, as opposed to having been created due to the internet and software for music production, as has often been cited in some of the scholarship about digital cumbia, which is credited to a middle-class intelligentsia. Being based in faraway Australia and doing tours of Europe to make a living, I've operated as a DJ and live performer mostly in the world of clubs and festivals rather than street dances. Always aware of this, in recent years I've invested in becoming more directly connected to the sonidera culture in Mexico, and in many ways it has been easier to open those doors as a curious researcher than as a touring DJ from Australia. And during my 2019 research trip, I did manage to solidify my connections to be invited back to also perform in the sonidero world. But then the pandemic hit and all travel, of course, stopped, for me at least from Australia. My presentation today was inspired by the first impressions of the pandemic as lockdowns began to be imposed all across the world in early 2020. And I was forced to reflect on the existential state of DJing and performing music on a global level, and especially in the sound system culture of Mexico. In scientific terms, I'm presenting today just some raw data of online ethnography, but mostly I will just be sharing some of my reflections of how the pandemic is affecting my own research and thinking about Mexican sonidera culture. So, who are the sonideros and sonideras, the operators of sound systems in Mexico? Sonidero just means sound system operator, and they are part of a sound system culture that is parallel to that of Jamaica, for example. In Mexico, sonidera culture first emerged in the 1940s with the convergence of new audio technology and cities exploding with poor rural migrants. The earliest sonideros collected mostly Afro-Cuban records, to which from the 1960s onwards, Colombian cumbia was added and grew to dominate. In Mexico City, the sonideros are best known for a tradition of closing up streets for their dances, but this is becoming more and more difficult to keep doing. For some greater insight into sonidero culture, I can highly recommend the books of Miriam Wirtz, who is also part of this year's conference, documenting sonidero culture through photography and capturing raw oral history through interviews, and most importantly, collaborating with local protagonists of the sonidero scene. I can also highly recommend you watch Joyce Garcia's brilliant documentary, Yo No Soy Guapo, which is also screening as part of this conference's film festival. And Joyce's film is very much an invitation to dance, but it also shows the struggle for survival of street cultures. The first of these is the right of the dancers to exist in constant negotiation and battle with the authorities over doing events on streets, often the only public space accessible to hold these events, representing the communities and home of course, in the most precarious parts of the cities, the barrios, the ghettos. It goes without saying that these communities are also the ones suffering the most during this pandemic, faced with even more precarity, more suffering, losing incomes, losing loved ones, and their own lives. There are many sonideros who have died due to COVID-19. Dances have either been totally illegal during lockdowns or can only be hosted at a much smaller, restricted scale. This involves taking of temperatures, keeping distance, wearing masks, alcohol for hands, and dances have been raided and stopped for not following these measures. But the bigger the suffering, the more vital sonidero culture becomes. So the online presence has become even more important than it already was. And in a very small way, that's what I hope my presentation can contribute to today, the online presence of sonidero culture. As always, well, the sonidero culture has always had a big presence online. And when here in Australia, we were suddenly in lockdown, I could sense people's anxiety in Australia, that is, of not being able to travel or work freely for the first time ever in their lives. And it hit me to think how the sonideros have faced an extremely harsh lockdown for decades, that is, being locked down inside a Mexico in a precarious socioeconomic reality, as hundreds of thousands of Mexicans have crossed the border into the US for work. Sonidero culture traveled with them. But once across the border without legal permission, they are stuck. And Mexicans have been separated for years and years in this way from their loved ones until they decide it's time to go home and cross back into Mexico with whatever they've managed to save up. This is a very harsh type of lockdown, which has been faced by millions, and a big part of sonidero culture has been facilitating online communication, sending greetings and salutations across the border via their own online channels. And also a lot of songs have been composed that directly reflect this crossing of the border since, and have been directed towards people listening across the border that haven't seen their family for years. Since the first handheld video cameras, sonidero dances have been enjoyed on film, and since YouTube started, some of this footage has been shared there. In the last 3 or 4 years, an increasing number of dedicated sonidero YouTube channels have appeared, where it's not just footage from the dancers, but also interviews with sonideros, with sound engineers, with dancers, broadcasts of sonidero meetings, mini documentaries. Now, during the pandemic, the amount of documentation has exploded, coming from the sonideros themselves. Most of these are online live broadcasts via Facebook. The dedicated sonidero YouTube channels by the likes of Richard TV have also flourished, of course, from a few thousand to almost 1 million subscribers in the case of Richard TV, who started with a selfie stick but now has a camera crew. I'm just going to briefly share. This is just his intro page on his YouTube channel. It's got like 800,000. It's got a couple of other channels as well with 100,000 or so subscribers. There are several other channels with similar amounts of followers, and each broadcaster has a particular style. Richard TV, for example, has taken on many techniques and conventions of commercial TV networks in surprising his interview guests and raising the spectacle. There are also online pirate radios starting up and being shut down. Some sonideros have also had their Facebook pages shut down due to copyright infringements, but many more haven't, probably because they mainly broadcast music not represented by the major labels, which of course impose these shutdowns. Here's an example from early last year. So this of a neighborhood gig from a rooftop in the barrio of Peñón de los Baños, which is known in Mexico City as Little Colombia. The sonidero is called Sonido La Conga of the Perea dynasty. I'm just going to share my video. Hang on, let me share. Sorry, let me try that again. Share screen. Sorry, I'm not sure if that now shared, but I can just quickly say that it's basically a video showing sonido. This is not working yet. Showing the sonido La Conga on a rooftop in the barrio, in his popular neighborhood, and it's just him and like 3 or 4 friends or helpers that work part of his staff, and then the camera screens across to the rooftops in the surrounding houses, and there's people dancing on the rooftops that he's broadcasting essentially onto people's rooftops because they're all locked down in their houses and not allowed to leave. So it's a bit like when we saw in Italy, people singing, I guess, from the balcony. And I want to show as well briefly an image of Sonido Caribali. He was a pioneer in touring the US during the 90s, and he's been doing regular online broadcasts. And let's see if that works. Did people see those photos? Not working. Well, there's been a lot of broadcasts. I don't know why it's not working. Share screen, share sound. My apologies. I thought we tested it all before and it worked. But yeah, so there's a lot of broadcasts been happening from inside people's basements, in people's homes essentially, which are not as glamorous as the big shows that have been people are used to seeing with massive LED screens and lights and everything. So, in conclusion, the bringing together of people, which is so central to Sonidero culture, is happening on localized levels in smaller circles. Before the pandemic, emphasis was increasingly on the size of the dancers, technology. Now, some of the biggest Sonidero stars are being broadcast without the masses on the dance floor, with much less fanfare and spectacle. These much more humble videos may portray an increased precarity, but have also emphasized the behind-the-scenes connections and remind us of the organization that goes on beyond dances as a form of mass entertainment, to also see these as community meetings, political organizations, nuclei of a way of resisting homogenous corporate and government-sponsored culture. Reduced to the bare bones and seeing the Sonideros dancing themselves, which is one of the images I wanted to show before, show the Sonidero again, gets onto the dance floor himself. Seeing broadcasts from their rooftops, their patios are stark reminders of where the Sonideros go once the glamour of the dance is over. It's now more important than ever to show solidarity and connection by contributing through online engagement, through documentation, through analysis and reflection. It's my hope that there will also be new alliances, connections, tactics, and strategies to make Sonidero culture even more resilient in the future, when it's possible again to travel and to dance. And of course, that is extended to all the other sound system cultures that people are talking about here. And I definitely, heard myself nodding to the two presentations I've seen so far, essentially mirroring similar situations. My take obviously was quite different because I'm in faraway Australia, mainly at the moment, just being able to engage via online. So thank you very much. Apologies for the technology not working, but I'm happy to send anybody any images or links or things if you are interested to know a bit more. And thank you again, Sound System Outernational, for making this awesome, bringing this awesome group of people from all over the world together to talk about what we love and fight for.
Okay, thank you very much, Moses. I can confirm we did do a sound check and everything before, and everything worked perfectly. So these are the things that happen with technology, everybody. Yes, that was an amazing talk. It gave me more things to think about, possibly gave you things to think about too. So remember, any questions in the Q&A, if they're specifically for Moses, please put his name in alongside the question so that we have that there. It made me think about some of my own research where I talk about music as evidence of existence or a sonic footprint timestamp, and there's something really powerful about people coming together and sharing, and how some people are criminalized for coming together and sharing, and other people it might not be so bad, or those same ideas of the ways that people come together to share may be extracted and used in more respectable situations, for lack of a better term. And there's also definitely something spiritual and sacred about coming together and changing the social structures of the things around. I know Julian writes about some of this ways of embodied knowing as well. But let me stop talking, because once again, that is one of my favorite pastimes when it comes to research. And we'll move on to Pax Nindi, whose paper is about sounds virtuality. So take it away.
Okay, so we do the same connection business. Right, and then share the screen. George, share the screen.
Okay, so whilst that's happening, just to remind everybody, any questions, do put them down in the Q&A. We are eagerly awaiting questions so that we can ask all the panelists questions at the end.
George? Okay, I think after there, yeah, looks like I'm in business.
Okay, good stuff. Take it away.
Can you see it now? You can see the full screen? Only that I can't hear anyone, but that's okay. All right, thank you very much for inviting me for the second year round. And it's also interesting seeing some of these speakers, because some of them are people that I really admire a lot. So it's more of an honor, really. And my presentation is more going to talk about digital challenges. And I feel like a sort of a little of a pioneer in that, it's a 1986, I started doing when the Gleaner called me the first dub VJ, when I was mixing this. So I'm going to be fast as well, because I think most of you know that I love talking, and I need to put my clock on timer so I don't actually run out. So here we go, we start. Okay, so I'm going first of all to start by what Abba Shanti said when he had the session in my studio, which is here. So I just played that, and I got him to come and do this sound system thing.
You see, them can't stop the music and can't stop the progress and all. We have to use technology to get the message across. Yeah, man, word sound is power. People need upliftment in this time. You see, them can't stop.
Okay, so that's my brother Abba Shanti just saying exactly how I feel, and that's what most people feel. And before I sort of talk about the digital thing, I just want to quickly, I think Monique has already run through what I do, but I need just to come back to you can see where I'm coming from. And I started sort of doing dub vision, something called dub vision, which was a performance in the Albany, where I would bring different sound systems. So the first one was Abba Shanti, then I brought Manasa, then I brought just different sound systems like that. And what's interesting is I was at a party since 1992. I was at a party and I was doing this thing in the Albany, but I was in North London at a party. And then I had people talking and somebody says, oh, there's no dub sessions in South London. And somebody says, oh, no, there is one that was started in the Albany called Dub Vision. Then I realized what I was doing is actual one, because at the time I just thought I'm messing around in Devon. But then I found out like how much people love this music. And then I took this to the Rocket where I was doing it with Jashaka. And then after that, I started working with the different sound systems like Saxon and the other, even Young Warrior. And then I moved into Carnival because I was at the Albany. I was at the Arts Council as a senior officer for 10 years. That's why I worked for 10 years. And I also wrote the strategy for Carnival in this country via the Arts Council. And then when I did that, that's when I started getting into more of the dub, more of the sound system that I started knowing. And then I started doing things. I started going on radio. I was Radio Jima in Bristol. And then I was also on Radio Amnesia in Pernambuco in Brazil. And then I started doing rail back and all these different things. And then I also held an event in the Olympic Park, working with continental drifts. And then I also started taking my reggae everywhere. And then all of a sudden in Brazil, I started performing in Brazil, in Pernambuco, where my band became known for the sort of like Zimbabwe, because I'm from Zimbabwe, mixing the lyrics with that. But dub has just been the thing that took over. And then one of the things that I've mentioned, Jankanu. Jankanu is a new TV channel that I started on Boxing Day. It was mainly to do with dressing Jankanu. As you know, Jankanu is a tradition that's known in the Caribbean. It happens Christmas time. But then this Jankanu TV was a 4-hour thing on Boxing Day. And then on that day, it became a 6-hour thing because people wanted something to see something. That's when I started thinking, really, the reggae community really needing to get into this because a lot of people love the music. And also the other thing that I would say is when I came to this conference, to speak at this conference last time, I mentioned that I did this video, Visions, one by Jashaka. And then that day, that's when I found out that somebody actually put the whole video on YouTube as their own video. So these are some of the things I'm going to talk about, the challenges of doing our things with the music. So this was something that I did with, working with culture promotion and Jashaka. And I created the first, I think it's the last video really about, Jashaka sound system, where he was doing live and also he was doing sound system. So I mixed those things to make up this video. Because of time, I'm not going to show the whole thing. But I was going to show some of the stuff that I do, which is mixing up with visuals. I was doing the visuals like this, verses from the Bible and all that. Then I'll show that on screen. Things like that. That's all some stuff that was throwing. But if you remember, this is 1989. There was no Apple. So I was using all this with a Amiga computer and some really, really old computers to do this thing. Now is everybody can do it. So I sort of like really, even on this. So that is the session that Jashaka used to do in the Rocket. Now the challenge is, as I say, one of the first one is the one that I just mentioned, that video was taken by somebody, I think they're in Russia or somewhere, and they put it in as their own video and they're getting like 20,000 hits and so on. I also had Abba Shanti doing a session in here in my studio. That was it's last summer. And by the time I finished, my video only had like 300 views. And then when we looked the next day, somebody took that whole video and they got about 15,000 views of the same video that I got 300 views in. So these are some of the challenges. And when COVID came, I was touring in Ghana. And then when I saw this, I came back. And then I realized my work is carnival. It's happening in the streets. So there was no work for me now because of COVID. I was also touring with a band called Atakak, where the year before that, in 2018, we did 59 cities all over the world touring with this thing. Then I realized that won't be happening. So I panicked. And what I did is I went to the University of YouTube and I spent 2 weeks locked in a room to learn how to live stream. And then since then, the whole summer, up to now, I'm so busy live streaming, but something that I had to learn in order to address this situation that we had. I still want to do some gigs. So I got carried away and I got some equipment. So I just like, if somebody's going to set up for this thing, the gear and the tech are always a nightmare, especially in the reggae world. A lot of people really don't use these things. So there's been a lot of different people who've been offering training online for people to understand, understand how we use live streaming, understand how we use Mixcloud and so on. And I was naive, just like some people have noticed, where when I did my first session, I was playing all the music and I put it on YouTube and Facebook. And guess what? 2 minutes later, the whole thing was taken down because of copyright. I wasn't aware of all this sort of copyright situation. So now I'm live streaming on Mixcloud, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and all that. But I've learned that if I'm going to show anything, you have to look on the video on YouTube and make sure that it says Creative Commons. Then you're okay. Without that, you're stuck. And then playing Michael Jackson music, of course, you get completely stuck. So these are some of the challenges I found. But I'm also talking about the access, that not many people have got access to some of the stuff that we've got here. And also, I think in UK, there is libraries where people get a lot of access, but other places is different. In my country, Zimbabwe, you'll be lucky to get a camera, let alone actually all these live streaming things. So that becomes a challenge. But at the same time, I'm looking at these as the weapons for us to challenge. I'm managing now to do some live dance shows and so on, just using live streaming, and people have got used to it. So while the COVID is such a terrible thing, it sort of brought some other things that we don't have. Like, for example, I organized Carnival myself. I just did Oxford Carnival 2 weeks ago. And a lot of people who don't usually come to it came. These are elders who are scared that there is beer, there is people drunk and so on. But all of a sudden now they are part of Carnival. So there is sort of advantages in terms of this thing. This is Solution Sound. I was running Hackney Carnival for 6 years. And we started, I hope you can hear me while I'm speaking with the sound on. I don't know how to put, oh. Okay, I can talk what this is here. So in Hackney, I got commissioned to run the carnival 7 years ago, and then I started running it every year. When I started, there was no traditional sound system in Hackney, in carnival. That did not exist. And then I introduced, first of all, by taking, some of you might know Hackney, there's a road called Ridley Road, which is a market. I put in the first sound system, which was Solution Sound. And then the following year, we had 3 sound systems. And the following year, we had 6 sound systems. By the last year we used Ridley Road, the police came and said, you can't use this anymore. Because people were coming for the sound systems. People were coming from Paris, Amsterdam, and so on, for the sound systems in Ridley Road. So the police had said, we have to stop this. So we stopped it just before the COVID in 2019. And then we used other locations, but that became big. But personally, for me, I believe it was the sound system that actually started bringing people there. So people love this. And then getting on, as I say, I taught myself how to live stream. I'm still looking at the time, so don't worry. Yeah, okay. So I led myself out to live stream. And last year, I was live streaming different things. I got Abba Shanti wanted to do a whole live streaming thing. I brought him here and we did a whole 2-hour session. Then after that, somebody saw it. Then Leicester Carnival booked Abba Shanti to play, and I did it here. And then after that, I did the whole of Hackney Carnival. We live stream it here, which is what the image you're seeing there. And then I did other people like Ja Prophecy, Young Warrior. And I've also, like, in terms of my organization, we help other people. There is an element also, which is a weakness in our community, that, you know, most people don't know how to fill in these funding applications. So some people have to work. So there's a young man, Young Warrior, which is Jashaka's son. Somebody took his whole sound system, they stole it, the whole thing, to a point where he's been really, really upset. So I went to see him, and then I sort of helped him do an application to the Arts Council. And then I'm also involved with other things like the Freedom Festival in Hull. So this is a bit of a session with Abba Shanti here. So I tend to use a lot of the, you know, Rasta messages with the visuals at the back.
Bring that music on.
So when I'm doing these visuals, I do the same thing that I used to do before, where I put in the different meanings of what the message is. So if it's Ja Rastafari, I've got a lot of images that I show at the back. Again, now I've learned that, you know, I have to look at Creative Commons material, otherwise somebody will be very upset with me. Now, what are the opportunities? The opportunity is a global reach. What you can see there is my band in Recife in Brazil. So for 6 months, I go and tour with them. And now, even though I'm not in Brazil, we are communicating with each other. I'm actually working on an album that's nearly finished now, just working through this new technology. So I'll say we need to take advantage of that technology in terms of its global reach. We're now doing a Hackney Carnival. Hackney was mainly for local people. When I did live streaming last year, we had people coming from all over the world to Hackney Carnival. I did the same thing again just 2 weeks ago. I was also the artistic director for the Cowley Road Carnival in Oxford. So we streamed it. Normally it's just Cowley Road is a small street in Oxford, Oxfordshire. But when we did it, we had people from all over the world. I mean, I think it's part of some of it, just like my fans as well, like from Kenya, from Brazil, from Russia, and different places like that. So there is something we need to take advantage in terms of new technology. And then the funding, I've already mentioned that that is a problem, really. But I think what happened when the pandemic started, I helped a lot of the reggae artists set up their own live streaming, because the Arts Council had some funding, which was for artists. You could apply for, I can't remember, I think it was £5,000 or £10,000. So I managed to get a few, then sort of advise them what equipment to use, whether it's OBS or Ecamm and so on, that they can use for their thing, or whether they're editing with Final Cut Pro and so on. And then what I found is an opportunity with this is also the distribution, that it's much easier to distribute stuff now than it was before. In the past, if I didn't have a record company, I couldn't get my record out. Whereas now, I get my record, you know, like I did the last release I did in Brazil was a dub album. And that one there, I released everything myself. I got online, and there's a company that does releasing. They even master it for you, and then they put it out. So it's, I think, distribution in terms of digital thing, that's something needs to take care of. And then reflection and sharing also, I think that's, I don't know if any of you saw, there was a session that a young warrior did with Jashaka, his father. And that session, he brought them and he played his music, and then he was chatting with him as well. So you could see the sharing and reflections of the past and present. Yeah. So the way forward, for me, I would say the way forward is just keep those turntables going, because what we've got here is, I went into a school to talk about my music. I went with a record, and the first thing the kids said was, oh, how do you play that CD? What machine do you need for that CD? So that we still need to continue with the VANA, we still need to educate the young people. So this was a session for Profis, who did a session with me here as part of the Sound System Day. Because in the Hackney last year, I started the Carnival Day and also Sound System Day, something that I wouldn't have done if it wasn't digital. So I also want to mention some of the challenges of recording. Yeah. Now, the other thing I was talking about challenges, but one of the other challenges is that some of these things here are family viewing, right? People are watching this with their families. So, you know, as much as myself, I'm a well-known stoner. I smoke, I don't deny that. I say to everybody, including the police. But when we are doing these live streaming, like, for example, I was doing for Hackney, and the guys wanted to smoke, they bend their spliff there. That became a bit of a problem. So some of these things also need to be looked at, that, you know, what platform are you and how far can you go with the whole thing? So, I mean, I think this has been the shortest presentation I've ever done. So I'm going to leave you by saying thank you. And I want you to listen to that sound, this song here. That is the sound of the future, the sound of the past, and we need to keep that sound somewhere, somehow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Pax. That was amazing. It got me thinking about the role of education. It got me thinking about the new logistical, or the issues of controls around taking up space online. Does it need to be Creative Commons? How far can we push things? The role of new technology and opportunities and distribution, what challenges these may pose, and opportunities that these may pose as well. But I'm mindful of time, so again, if there are any questions, please put them down in the Q&A box, and I will be feeding those through to everybody at the end. But without further ado, just want to make sure I keep to time. We have Jean-Christophe Sevin, and he will be talking, his paper is entitled, Is the Party Essential? Techno Sound Systems in an Era of Health and Security. So take it away. Are you here? Oh, there we go, yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you for SSO organizer for this online meeting. Also, like everybody, I would prefer to meet all of you in a real place and real vibration sound system. But so I will talk about the French case with the techno sound system. And the situation in France. So, shortly after the coming to power of a socialist government in France in 1982, Fête de la Musique, Festival of Music, was created every June 21, and special license is commonly granted to open-air musical performances. On June 21, 2019, police forces took part in a midnight operation in order to stop a three-party sound system taking place on the Loire banks at the city of Nantes, causing a panic in the audience and leading to the death by drowning of Steve Canicho. Steve Canicho's death led to a movement of protest to honor his memory, and it was the case on the Technival of the Musique Interdite, Forbidden Music, organized 2 years later on June 19, 2021, to commemorate these days and also to show support to 9 people charged for the throwing of masquerade rave parties that took place on New Year Eve 2020. During this festival held in Redon, Brittany, another ultra-violent intervention was led by 400 police officers. It took place in the middle of the night with no visibility for 7 hours long confrontations. Tear gas grenades, riot guns, crowd dispersal grenade were used. On that night, a young man lost his hand because of the non-authorized use of such weapons, classified as war weapons. And independent newspapers claimed that on that night, the emergency service and journalists were prevented from entering the zone to rescue the wounded. Hence, the young man that lost his hand was driven to the hospital by ravers themselves. And on the next day, security forces came back to destroy all the instruments and sound system with total impunity. The pictures shared by the official police Twitter account speaks for itself. So there have always been confrontation between police and ravers with varying degrees of violence, but there have also been channeled conversations that prevent clashes as intense as Technival. These conversations, although minimal and fluctuating, were maintained until the middle of the 210s and correspond to a newer, wider context of class struggle. Here, I'm inspired by what Stuart Hall called thinking in conjuncture, trying to grasp the specificities of the present while avoiding on one side purely academic assumptions and on the other side to be locked in the particularism of the techno movement. Indeed, we need to understand the specificities of this movement within the framework of a wider set of power relations, and more precisely of an authoritarian hardening that is both general and also specific to contemporary France. So mapping the context, this conjuncture when it comes to power relation between the state and alternative independent space, such as techno-free parties, results from several patterns of spreading at different speeds and with reference to specific temporality. France is characterized by a presidential regime giving such power to the Republican ruler, and a situation that pushed beyond grotesque when it came to the crisis management during the COVID-19 pandemic, led by an erratic half-president, half-head epidemiologist, ruling with no clear direction nor any dialogue. A second tendency would be one that sees the neoliberal authority phase developing by not tolerating any contestation whatsoever on behalf of a mandatory adaptation of a deficient population. The latter trend has become more radical since 2016 with an attempt to scuttle the last positions in the Gramscian sense that made France a peculiar hybrid of neoliberalism and socialist model. This can therefore be qualified as a left great moving right show, as would say Stuart Hall, within which union struggle were discredited and that led to the emergence of the Yellow Vest movement. a grassroots movement interfering with common left-wing versus right-wing partisan structures, and don't play by the rules when it comes to demonstrations. Just like Free Parties, they don't ask for the approval of the prefecture beforehand and erupt unannounced with no dialogue with the authority. In this climate, the political power leaves it to the police to play as the only shield. In exchange for that, the police gets a sort of impunity, since police officers are rarely charged for their acts. Finally, we need to mention the law enforcement politics in France are utterly outdated compared to other European models. Those politics see demonstrations as a blind and violent mob, and this model has an inability to set up a channeled conversation and ignores the notion of de-escalation. Thereby, we can observe an escalation concerning the repression of social movements. This aims for a discouragement of the protesters through trap techniques, massive use of tear gas, riot guns, crowd dispersal grenades, all of those provoking numerous serious injuries. These tendencies were emphasized in the context of the pandemic SARS-CoV-2 with the adoption of a sanitary state of emergency. And so this is the climate in which take place the violent incident of Freeport. And so during the first lockdown in the spring of 2020, in a context of astonishment affecting the entire social structure, we can say that Free Parties and sound systems play by the rules. The best illustration of this is the decision not to organize a Technival for the 1st May of 2020, whereas it has been organized every year since 1994. And is a symbolic moment associated with the history of this movement. Many were aware of the inversion of responsibility, which consisted of blaming the unruly citizens for the epidemic, when it was the unpreparedness of the elites and the failing health systems that had led to the lockdown. As in other sectors of society, critics began to emerge after the lockdown in face of the inconsistency in the health front, supposedly the priority of the power, with crowded public transports and shopping malls, while at the same time, cultural centers, theater, concert hall, even bookstores remain closed, being classified as non-essential by the managers of the health order. If many cultural actors did not agree to continue this situation, it remains that the Free Party movement has the advantage of an organizational capacity to act outside established frameworks and to organize musical events is in an autonomous way. A large number of sound systems are united in a national coordination and have set up with allied association and lawyer a legal support fund for trials when there are confiscations of equipment so that it is generally recovered at the end of the trials. Taking over a place and setting up a sound system as quickly as possible is in itself a performance, and that is part of this culture. And at the same time, a tactic to catch the authorities off guard, because once a party has started, it is very difficult to stop it. Brittany has been a stronghold of Free Parties since 25 years, and the authorities know it. For New Year's Eve, a curfew from 8 p.m. was in place, and 100,000 men were deployed in the west of France to intercept possible clandestine parties, techno or not. That evening, 2,500 ravers managed to invest a warehouse in the village of Lioron in Brittany. After ravers forced 2 police blockades, faced with the risk of serious accident, the police forces decided to back down and let the party go on. As with other raves during the summer, this New Year Eve rave became a national affair and made the headlines of the 24-hour news channel. The Ministry of Home Affairs, who did not want to appear weak in the face of the extreme right, whose posture is busy adopting, made it an affair of state. On the morning of January 2, the police forces went into action and charged partygoers. A 21-year-old raver was arrested and would remain in custody until January 2. 8 others were arrested the following days, accused without evidence and risking sentences up to 10 years in prison. This triggered a movement of support, with demonstrations being organized in 12 cities over the following weeks, claiming Tristan's release and an end to the crackdown on free parties. Tens of thousands of people demonstrated with sound system and turned the street in public space into dance floor. During these demonstrations, sound system was seized by the police. Some cities, including Paris, issuing decrees banning the broadcasting of sound exceeding 80 decibels, and others simply banned the vehicles with the sound systems. So it was the sound itself that was targeted. This demonstration converged for a time, but without any real coordination, with a set of other struggles, with a demonstration against a new security law and a movement of occupation of theater for reopening of cultural venues. The free and independent Carnival of Marseille of March 25 sparked a national polemic in the media and political unanimity of a discourse similar to the one used towards raves, illustrating thereby the similarity with this multi-secular institution that has always disturbed the powers. As for technivals, no contamination clusters were found following this event. Finally, on May 1, 2021, a series of raves were quickly interrupted by the police, and at least for one of them, in addition to the use of the usual police arsenal, the destruction of sound equipment, turntables, and records was noted. On the one hand, giant masses at Christmas, clandestine dinners in luxury restaurants, clandestine New Year's Eve parties. On the other hand, carnivals and free parties. Many illegal events did not receive the same treatment as free parties. This reminds us of what Foucault said about the law functioning as a management of illegalism. The law is a management of illegalism, some of which it allows, makes possible, or invents as a privilege of the dominant classes, other which it tolerates, and other which it prohibits, isolates, and takes as an object, but also as a means of domination. It's an ongoing process. I don't want to present here definitive statements. Instead, I would like to end by questioning this movement and how it can be interpreted as a place of resistance. But in what sense should one understand resistance? Does resistance mean directly confronting the force of control, or in escaping them and disappearing? The free parties would then be similar to that art of resistance that James Scott talks about, a culture of escape and dissimulation with a rich traditions, as which of the TAZ, temporary autonomous zone, theorized by Akimbe and adopted by techno sound systems, may appear to be a late figure. It is true that that direct confrontation is often endured and not sought, but it is doubtful that asymmetrical confrontation is a fruitful means of polishing collective subjectivity. It is rather in the preservation of festive spaces for young working people or students, who are often precarious and constitute part of this public, and who suffer most of the current conditions of the health crisis. These spaces of socialization appear to be essential in the perspective of the social ecology for the preservation of mental health and in the face of the mental damage caused by the COVID and its consequences. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that, Jean-Christophe. Again, an excellent paper, and it got me thinking about the word compulsion came to mind, like the drive to actually want to be in these spaces, knowing the hostilities that are faced, by the attendees, and it made me think about the sacred, the spiritual, and all those things we've spoken about. But what I will do now is I'll move on to questions, because we have just over 20 minutes, and I know some of our very busy panelists have other busy things to do as well. So I will begin by posing a question to each panelist. So I'll ask a question, you can answer, and then I'll keep it moving. So just be mindful of the time. We've got 20 minutes. I should say that to myself as well, as someone who loves to talk a lot. And I can take it from there. So the first question, let's see. Okay, can we just make everybody, can we go back to gallery view as well? Is it possible to go to gallery view so we can see everybody?
If you stop sharing, that's there, you should be able to.
Okay, yes. So Jean-Christophe, if you want to stop sharing the screen.
I'm trying, I'm sorry, but I
No problem. Let's see. I don't think there's anything I can do on my side, but in the meantime, whilst you're doing that, I'll get started with the first question in the interest of time. So the first question is from Matthias to Sonjah. So Professor Sonjah, where did you get the data from surrounding the number of reggae events that happen in countries all around the globe, the market share it has in the respective nation, economy details, etc.? Do you think the same sources could be helpful to create similar graphs of other genres?
Thank you, Monique. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes, brilliant. So yes, the answer is yes. I think that data is replicable. It can in fact be used and should be used. I'm actually quite shocked to know it's not being used. It must be used. But just a little word on methodology is that the study, as I did say in my presentation, is to some extent longitudinal. It's quite a mixed method approach, and to a large extent, this project has relied not so much on extensive interviews, even though interviews have been used, but it has relied heavily on internet data mining. So there are quite a number of databases which I've used, Reggae Festival Guide. There are a number of other databases. There's crude internet survey of festivals occurring over many, many years, refinement of various lists, elite interviews with promoters, team members of both the United States and European and Jamaican contexts, where my cases are located. Surveys of participants were done, surveys in Jamaica, the UK, the USA, sorry, Europe, my case in Europe, Spain. And as I said, interviews, participant observation, internet searches, data mining, development of a reggae festival typology. Quite a number of things have gone into this work methodologically. And I'm sure that, even using data from Nielsen SoundScan, a number of ways in which we mapped worldwide concert and festival ticket revenues, that's through the Jamaica Data Mining Project. Global statistical data had to be mined in order to do this. Business Wire, IFPI, a number of conglomerations of data. So yes, I hope that helps.
Thank you for that very detailed answer. It's given me food for thought, definitely. Okay, so the next question is from Leonardo to Bruno. Listening to contemporary Brazilian funk tunes, we can hear some explicit lyrics on sex, day-by-day living in the favela, but not much songs about this genocide situation with Black people suffering 70% of the homicides in Brazil. Why do you think this subject is not covered so much in the funky eras?
Hi, thank you, Leonardo, for the question. I think there are two issues here. One is that some singers, they do talk about the situation. For example, MC Karosh has been writing some songs denouncing institutional racism and the violence against Black communities in Brazil. But it's true, it's not that this is like this is one example. Maybe we could find others, but it's not a widespread issue. Even though I think we should think about politics and how we think about politics in academia or in the press. And then when we think about politics, normally we think in a very Eurocentric way that someone needs to make explicit statements about something so that thing can be considered politics. And I believe that the MCs, most MCs, composers, singers, people involved with funk, they are in fact being political, and they're writing songs about the daily lives and and how the violence affects their daily lives in favelas. Many times they invent characters, and they create fictional narratives about this situation. And those narratives, they are political statements, but they are not political statements in the way that we might expect, that someone would come up and make a political discourse, or maybe write a lyric that is explicit in the sense of denouncing a situation. But in fact, the fact that when they write about the daily lives in favelas, when they describe the situation of violence, they are many times repressed for doing that, because it creates a conflict with the state. They are writing about things that the state and people they don't want to hear. So that's a political act, but maybe not a political act that we think as political when we think in this Eurocentric way. So just to give one of the songs from MC Carol is called Delação Premiada, which I think we could translate it plea bargain. And then she's comparing the treatment of the rich corrupt politicians, and when they are caught, how they're treated, with the treatment that people in the favelas they receive when the police enter those areas or when they are arrested. So this is one example. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Moses. Knowing both sonideros and sound system culture and technologies, what do you see as the parallels and the differences?
You hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So there's, I think, well, the reason and the purpose of their formation is a parallel. The ongoing innovation of being forced into DIY situations, into working out what the needs are. The closeness to the US is also a parallel with Jamaica, for example. But then that's just kind of like the bigger picture. There, it's a complete parallel, really. But then there's obviously the detail of like, yes, this innovation, what exactly are they trying to address technologically? In Jamaica, of course, a lot of focus on bass, which in some cases wasn't always the case in Mexico. And then, of course, some of the obvious differences are the musical choice, the performance style, where there's a lot of salutations, like over the top of the music constantly. Also a fixation with a lot of old gear, like old music, like recordings from Cuba in the 1940s. People still play shellac and stuff. Also even using like 1950s Gerard UK-made turntables are still quite a lot of sonideros who still use those and maintain them and adapt them. And so that's just a very quick answer to a very big question that needs further research for sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for beginning to answer that very big question. Okay, next question is for Pax from Jack. And he says, Pax, given that digital media conflicts with the physical experience of sound system, how do you propose we use digital media to enhance audiences rather than take away, which could become an enemy of promoters and also have a negative effect on the sound system culture economy? It's quite a big question.
It's a big question. It's got such a big challenge, but if you see some of the stuff I was saying, there is certain answers to that on some of my presentation I've done. For example, I was mentioning there is certain people who don't usually go to Carnival and they are going now through online. Same thing with the dub, but there is no way anybody can replace the sound of a PA system in a room than listening on here on my little computer and then try to have big speakers. There is such a serious difference. And a lot of stuff, I think that's one of the negative things I was saying earlier about the positive things about COVID, some of the stuff that we've managed to benefit, like learning how to live stream. But the negative part of it is that the production, right now as I speak, I know somebody who used to do doublets for me, But they used to have a lot of people every day, a lot of people, artists sitting there, and we used to link up with each other. But now they're telling me that they only open once a month because not many people can make stuff until the pandemic is gone. And also, I think there is certain people trying to replace sound system by doing this silent disco where you get reggae music, you put your headphones on, and then you can listen while you're walking and so on. It's not the same, really. Whether we like it or not, it will never be the same. So there is dedicated people who want to be at the sound system, and there is people who don't like it because they say it's too loud. Then there is the young generation, which is my target. They don't know if they like sound systems or not. So if we don't find a way of taking them there, they will stay in the digital domain. So those are my challenges for me personally. That's why when I finished by playing the sound of a record, because the young people, we really need to educate them. They are the ones who make a difference in what we are doing with Dubnext in the future.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Again, it comes back to that education. If they don't know that they like it, they need to be exposed to it. So yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, a question from Moana to Sonjah. Thank you, Professor Niaah, for such an inspiring presentation. From the perspective of performance geography and with regard to the further marginalisation of street reggae cultures for sanitary reasons, do you believe that a polarisation is occurring between the consumption of more expensive reggae festivals targeting the new reggae pilgrim, vaccinated, middle class, with the rights of mobility and fast broadband, and the experiences that are becoming even more underground and restricted? In other words, does the politics from below survive when the pandemic divides the reggae audiences even more than before?
Excellent question. And I mean, when I think about it, do you believe that a polarization is occurring? We've always been living in the midst of polarization. I don't know that there are very many new polarizations occurring. And I really believe that there are just polarizations being reproduced, all forms being reproduced in new ways. So that my answer to your question, even though I haven't necessarily looked deeply at this, it's that no, I don't believe that there is any new polarization occurring. I believe that there are old forms of polarization that are being, let's say, they're being remobilized, let's say, or they are coming at us anew, but they are not new. And so let's think about even just fast broadband. You think about internet access and the kind of disparity in access to broadband globally. Those disparities remain. I mean, and if you think about the kind of reggae pilgrim in a place like in Europe, in various, when I go to Rotterdam Sunsplash, for example, these are people who, some of them are of means, some of them have saved for the entire year, some of them, it's the one excursion that they will do and they have prepared for it. And there are people who are experiencing the festival at different levels in different ways. And I think that will remain. I don't see that changing. I hope I've answered your question.
Okay, thank you. That was a very thorough answer. So yes, I'm hopeful that it did. Okay, so there is a question from David Katz to Bruno. Your presentation brought to mind hostile state intervention meted out against Black communities who pioneered sound system culture in the UK, as well as a similar state oppression brought to bear against Jamaican sound system originators. Though your talk highlighted actual genocidal practices by the state against communities, where the Baile Funk is celebrated in Brazil. Post-pandemic, what do you see as the way forward in terms of dismantling this kind of genocidal practice?
Thank you, David Katz, for the question. I think the way forward to dismantle genocides, first we need to acknowledge that this is a situation that derives from colonial rule and also colonial structures that are still valid to this day, which I would call coloniality of power, following Quijano. So this is something that we need to change many different structures in order to actually have a change. But there are a few issues that I think can be tackled first and need to be changed. For example, the politics of war on drugs. This is necessary, and I don't believe it would completely stop the situation we live today, but I'm sure we could really have a change And I think another sector that I want to talk about is the justice system, because we talk a lot about the police, and of course they are the ones who pull the trigger. But we need to know that in Brazil, for instance, 99% in Rio, 99% of the police that committed violence or homicide, they are acquitted by the justice system. So they are the ones pulling the trigger, but actually when it comes to finding justice, we don't have it. So that's something that needs to change, and it will only change when we change the institutions that compose the justice system. So we have many different studies in Brazil that show that most of the justice system is composed by white people, and they're trying to change that over the years by changing the examinations and adding affirmative action, so we can have more Black people inside the justice institutions. But the system is still very, it's not still very good, because they have I would need to enter into details, but in the end, it doesn't guarantee that more Black people enter those institutions. So we need changes on those systems. So I think those are two of the sectors that I can do, or the two of the questions that I can stress right now. That would be a very good start to end this situation in Brazil.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the answer. So we've got a question for Jean-Christophe, and the question is similar to Bruno Monish's question. Your presentation brought to mind the hostile state intervention meted out by to the Black communities who pioneered sound system cultures in the UK and Jamaica. So considering again post-pandemic, the post-pandemic situation in France and the Free Parties, what do you see as the way forward for trying to dismantle this hostility?
Thank you, David, for this question. On one aspect, I didn't have the time to talk about this. The way sound system culture pioneered by Jamaican sound system in France is not really clear for the public of Free Parties. I hadn't had the time to develop that, but and it is one of the points I should have made. But, after Luron was kind of big event in very mediatic thing. So and we are in a pre-election time. So negotiation and meeting have been programmed between President Macron and the National Association Technopole, who organize Techno Parade in Paris since years. And but I don't know, because it's I follow this movement since maybe 25 years. I made my PhD. It was my subject of PhD. So although I have a lot of critics to address to this movement, but sorry, it's my son. I have a lot of I'm not really optimistic, because as I say, and as in a lot of countries, it's not specific to France, but seeing that trends in the authoritarian mood and this kind of illiberalism practice of power, I'm not really optimistic, and maybe this will continue, and with fluctuant intensity, but maybe it will be more easy for the festivals and other types of musical event. For Free Parties, I don't know. I'm not really optimistic for the future for this movement, but we'll see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your answers and questions. We do have more questions, but unfortunately we are very, very tight on time. So what I will do is, I'm sorry for those who I was unable to answer your questions. They were very, very good questions. But we need to wrap up, as I've said. So thank you for joining us. And tomorrow we have session 3, and that is writing histories, explorations of sound system culture, at the same time between 4 and 6, same platform. So make sure you log on and check it out. And stay with us for those of you who are interested, want to listen to some music and enjoy the premiere on YouTube. We are going to have a premiere performance at 6 o'clock or at the top of the hour with the Kebra Ethiopia sound system, and they've been playing reggae roots music at township community parks for over 10 years. It was established in Kwatemba, one of the townships located in the southwest of East Rand in Gauteng, South Africa. By using reggae as a music tool, it is a movement that concerns itself with community, upliftment, socio-economic issues, ghetto living, and spreading Pan-African teachings. Throughout this activism, it has been able to recruit and inspire the community by offering a safe, socializing space of meditation. The music communities communicate spirituality, thereby maintaining African pride, embedding roots and culture with authentic integrity. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Thank you for having me, Sound System Outernational 7. I am Monique Charles and I was your chair for today. So thank you very much. And I hope you enjoy the session, the jamming session shortly that's taking place.